So if it seems overwhelming, it won't. So what are your questions? What questions do you have? Yep. Jean.
Under the Capstone project on page 1, the rainscaping project for a team of 2, it says teams will be comprised of 1 member, each member from rainscaping.
Cross out that second member.
Okay. Okay,
So 1 member each from rainscaping and behavior. So somebody in your team went to the behavior change track. Somebody
Okay.
went to the rainscaping track.
Okay.
Up to you.
But you're both going to do this rainscaping project, and are the same two people also going to do this community behavior change program?
Correct.
Okay.
So both of you will work on both pieces
things.
of the capstone.
Okay.
But somebody's got to be in charge of drawing the rain garden, and somebody's got to be in charge of making copies, or writing the survey, or whatever kind of behavior change you want to do.
Okay.
So you'll both participate in both pieces,
Okay.
because we want you to know about both aspects of this.
Okay.
But you decide in your team who's going to be taking the lead on the rainscaping and who's going to be taking the lead on the behavior. And I leave it up to you. And if you both want to do both, so understand, this is a framework. We're trying it out to see how it works. Now what I expect from you is to say, okay, that's what it says, but can I do this? And my answer will probably be yes. So if you want to do it a little differently, my answer will probably be yes. Yep.
Originally, I was under the impression that the goal is to have the capstone projects completed by October 24th, and it says on here that they will just present the proposed project. So what is the timeline for completion?
The timeline for completion, we live in Minnesota. It could snow at the end of September.
It could snow in August.
It could snow in August. It snowed on May 2nd, and on May 14th it was 90 degrees. So the dates of this are flexible. If you need up to a year to complete your rainscaping project, we'll give you a year.
Oh.
I would like things to be done before the snow flies. My goal is for you to complete your capstone project and wrap it up by the end of fall. On October 24th, which is the last scheduled session we have in this program, I would like you to do some sort of reflective presentation. Here's where we are in the project, here's what we did, here's what we learned, here's what we'll do better next time. Some sort of reflective 10-minute presentation.
You know what I would like if we had time? I don't think we do.
Okay.
But I would like something between now and October 24th that would give us, give each team an opportunity to do a 5 to 10 minute presentation on our proposed projects. Because I suspect there would be a lot of value in the feedback we would get from the group about possible revisions or...
Yep. So here's what's going to happen. Between now and June 18th, which is our next scheduled session, you're going to actually write a proposal. And I've got that here somewhere. Yes. You're actually going to take, and I'll put this up on the site electronically, you're going to actually take this capstone project proposal outline and you're going to fill it in.
Oh, great.
In the next, before June 18th, and this is a deadline. So this is something you need to do. So between now and June 18th, I actually want you to write your proposal out. We'll give you some time tonight to talk through it. Yep.
Okay.
On June 18th, we're going to have at least 2 designers from Metro Blooms. We'll have Maria Donnells come back to talk about the behavior change campaigns. We'll have Joe Barton come to talk about the cost share application. And you're going to take your proposal to them and sit in a group of your peers and get feedback. So that's the first step. We'll try and get a check-in later in the summer. Just to have everybody come back together, check in, see how you're doing.
Okay.
But between now and June 18th, you and your team, you and your partner, have to sit down and actually fill out that proposal, and you're going to write and formalize your proposal. Here's the BMP we're talking about, here's the location, here's who's gonna lead that project, here's the behavior we wanna influence, here's how we think we're gonna measure it, all of that.
So in this proposal here, it says the social assessment, who lives here, what do they do? And
Yep.
are you saying between now and June 18th, we have to answer those questions?
No. Between now and when the snow flies, you gotta answer those questions.
Okay,
So
but they're part of
as
the proposal,
part,
that's why I'm asking.
as part of your behavior change campaign, which I hate the name of, we gotta think of a better name. Education and outreach. It sounds like re-indoctrination campaign. I hate the name of it, so let's think of, give me some suggestions. But anyway, the outreach campaign. Let's do this, it's called the outreach campaign. Between now and the 18th, you need to think about and observe what's going on in my neighborhood that I might be able to influence. And that's what that assessment is. I want you to look. I want you to observe. Are there grass clippings on the lawn? Where? Do you notice people using fertilizer? Do you notice people using other lawn chemicals? You have a question?
Yeah. Does each member of the team do that in their own neighborhoods?
Good
and
question.
How big is your neighborhood?
Excellent
Are
question.
we
Thank
talking about like lots?
And does it have to be your neighborhood?
Exactly.
It's probably going to be most effective as a point of beginning, and your capstone is a point of beginning, for you to work in the neighborhood of somebody that you're working with, in your neighborhood. So you're working with either your neighbors or your partner's neighbors. You define the size of the neighborhood. I would take a couple blocks, and that's it. Start small.
Should it be where your installation's gonna be for sure? Like,
Could be. It could also be the neighborhood where you feel most comfortable talking to people. You're going to start small. So probably it'll be your neighborhood or your partner's neighborhood.
Could it be the church that I go to 4 blocks down the street?
Yes.
Okay.
See how that works? I say that.
So could you like maybe identify a problem somewhere and look at that?
Yes, you can do that too.
I'm just kind of.
Yep. You could start
Try and
with an
figure out.
observed issue. It could be erosion. It could be steep slopes. It could be grass clippings in the streets. It could be clogged storm drains. You could start with the problem and then
What if
go
it's
to
a
the neighborhood.
problem that is not related to residential neighborhoods, persons, community members?
Give me a
What
for
if it's-
instance.
Well, for example, there on the Cedar Avenue Bridge over Lake Nokomis, they have engineered these grooves in the street
Yep.
so that when a large storm event occurs, the water pours violently down onto the platform below and washes dirt and gravel into the lake. That's, if I wanted to do something about that, I would have to approach government entities.
Run screaming away from that project.
Okay, that's
Run
why I asked.
screaming.
That's why I asked.
Start small. Start with
Okay.
some sort of individual behavior that you observe in whatever neighborhood you want to work in.
Okay.
Don't take on a
Hennepin
big
County.
commercial development. Don't take on the government.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Run screaming. Jackie.
I have a question about, I guess, the quality, quantity, rate.
Yep.
How are we, identifying pollutants?
Yep.
Are we to figure out
Well-
the tools of the trade? Are we giving the tools of the trade?
If you think about the sessions we've had, things that influence quality would be nutrients and sediments going into the water. Quantity would be too many hard surfaces, too much water running into the storm sewers. Rate would be concentrating all that into a small area and it rushes down the waterway. So think of those as your pollutants and then go from there. So I want to keep coming back to the things that affect water are quality, quantity, and rate.
And good. So list major pollutants. Okay, so just on that, I guess, 'cause when I read that, I read, okay, what am I,
Right.
going down chemically or?
Well, somebody who was, Catherine, you were saying something about there's an area in White Oaks that's paved and all the water runs off. That's a quantity issue.
For each one of their swamps, except for one that's landlocked, they have a diversion that's 3 feet wide, it's blacktop, and then going down to the swamp, it's like a sheet.
Right. So that's a
Each
quantity
one.
issue and a
Yeah.
rate issue.
And those are the points, I guess when I read that, I think, we want humans and chemicals and.
No,
No, just
It's-
step back, it's just like the three.
those are the 3 categories
Three categories.
of things that we're looking at with live and runoff. Yep.
We've identified several properties, people that are interested in this program.
Yep.
And when I get to part 3 action, we're supposed to measure that individual's behavior, right? The neighborhood's behavior, I'm confused by that.
So one of the things that we want stewards to feel comfortable doing is to talk to people about what they do on the land that has an effect on water quality. So if you've got a neighborhood of highly maintained lawns with lots and lots and lots of lawn that stretches on forever, that's a lawn care practice that you might want to influence by maybe cutting out some beds and doing native planting, or other kinds of alternative landscaping that would infiltrate and absorb and clean water better. So you might want to take on the front lawn behavior in your neighborhood and just see if you can't push on it. So you could go around and ask people, tell me, do you fertilize? How often do you mow? Just get a sense of, in a 3 or 4 block area, who's really dedicated to that green lawn, and then figure out how you're going to influence that, and then go back later and see if it made any difference.
I'm just observing that you started out telling us to do 1 or 2 blocks, and you just said do 3 or 4.
I'm always going to.
Well, and
So it-
it may be helpful to get data from 3 or 4 blocks, but concentrate your effort to change behavior on 1 or 2.
Exactly.
Would you shy away from?
Does that just?
To a degree,
Yep.
I mean, and probably I'm getting hung up because this is my profession.
Right.
But, with these various properties, things have been identified of what need to be done.
Mhm.
So then, and if we pick one of those things, then we're supposed to then go and talk to all the neighbors about that same thing, or observe a behavior that's consistent through the neighborhood, and go and talk about that, even though what we're going to do on this particular property is something different.
Okay, that's a great scenario. Let's say you choose, this is your property, you're going to do a rain garden or a rain barrel that goes to a rain garden, some sort of treatment trail. Your outreach campaign might then be to have an open house, invite neighbors from 3 blocks around to come and see what you did, and say that, and then what you're trying to do is actually influence the fertilizer that people are using. So, you have an open house, you showcase this, you talk about this is why we did it, but you don't have to go all this way. You can take one simple step. We're encouraging people in this neighborhood to reduce the fertilizer that they put on their lawns. And if you do use fertilizer, use it in the spring and sweep it up off the sidewalks when you use it. You don't have to do a rain garden. If you do that, that'll help too. And then go back and see who did it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So part of this is you're in a very difficult position because you have to separate being a citizen from your training, your background, your career, all of that. The rest of us schlubs, we can just go out and do this. I have no background knowledge to forget. So it's going to be more difficult for you to make that division.
Get your partner to do that part.
Yeah. Yes.
So what you're saying is that the behavior change, the outreach campaign, and then the action, so the other part, the design stuff.
So you got the rainscaping and you got the outreach.
Yeah, and they should be your outreach campaign should be somehow connected to your rainscaping, your stormwater. So like, are they gonna be trying to get at the same problem, the same type of pollution, the same behavior?
Good question. They
Or
don't
are they-
have to.
Okay, they can be separate.
They can be separate.
Okay.
All we want is that each aspect deals with stormwater.
Okay.
We want to influence people's practices and behaviors around stormwater. So they don't have to be the same thing. You don't have to try and convince everybody in the neighborhood to do a rain garden like you put in your yard. But we do want you to see if you can influence what people do on the land in your neighborhood that would have an impact on water. What other questions do you have?
How do you influence these people who love their green lawns?
That's the question. You know, if you figure that out, you will be a rich woman. I swear to God, you will be a rich woman. That is the nut we're trying to
Pretty
crack.
established in my neighborhood.
It's very
Green
established.
lawn.
Now, one
No
clue
dandelions.
comes from that Twin Cities Household Ecosystem Project. Most people want a low input lawn.
Yeah.
So help me figure out how to have my green lawn without doing so dang much work. That's how you influence people. Me, I just let the weeds grow. That's how I do it.
Oh, that's not gonna.
No, that is not going to fly. But you can also, but part of the reason we want you to talk to people is to find out what else they value. Do they swim? Do they boat? Do they fish? Do they have any other identity with water?
Do they drink water?
Do they drink water? Are they in the health profession? Are they in the recreation? What do they do for recreation? Find a way to connect with something that they already care about. That's the only thing that we are pretty sure works to influence people. Now, understand, we do not expect you to change the whole neighborhood. We do not expect you to change the world. What we're trying to understand, Sheila, is exactly what you asked. How do we influence people? My entire profession is trying to find that answer. So that's why I'm saying, if you figure it out, you will be rich.
You can retire.
That's right, because I will steal your idea. No, I won't. So, understand, we are not expecting you to change your entire neighborhood. We simply are not. We're asking you to reach out to your community, to your neighbors. We want you to keep it close. We want you to keep it manageable. We want you to keep it small. We want to see how this works. I have many colleagues who've done very small campaigns. Let's focus on getting the downspouts to outlet into the grass or outlet into a rain garden. That was the only thing they wanted to change. To get the downspouts away from the impermeable surfaces and have them drained to someplace permeable, drained to a rain garden, something like that. That was the whole point of the campaign. They spent years on it. This is how change happens. So keep it small. What other questions? Yes?
So far we've been defining our community for our audience as the residents or the neighbors. Would working with the business community be an option as defining that as an audience? Like Jabari and I, the reason we were late today, we were talking with the owner of a business that might be interested in helping out, and he is very behind it. So the business associations that he belongs to could become audiences, especially in an area that's receiving such investment in development.
Yes.
So,
Okay, how that work? Go ahead, Bruce.
We're gonna pick one sort of best management practice to focus on, I guess. And I missed that one session where they covered that a little more thoroughly, but do we have a hierarchy of what are the most valuable for this part of this watershed to kind of emphasize?
What's the answer? What do you say?
Because I don't really know right now.
Leaves, any grass clippings.
But what installation? What BMP? What actual in the ground project should we prioritize?
It depends.
Yeah, that's right.
What?
Depends.
Depends.
So it will depend entirely on the site that you choose and what happens when you go evaluate that site.
But most of ours are going to be kind of
Wait,
similar.
I don't understand. Is site evaluation part of the landscaping project, or is site evaluation part of the behavior change?
It's part of the rainscaping part.
Okay.
You're going to go to a property,
Yeah.
and you're going to, first of all, you're going to download a map or an aerial photograph, like Rusty said. You're going to look at it. You're going to mark down what you noticed from the photograph, and you're going to actually go to the site. And I'm going to give you a little piece of paper here that gives you some ideas about what to look for.
Okay.
So the site evaluation is for the rainscaping track.
Okay.
The neighborhood assessment, you're going to do that for the behavior track. What do you
Okay.
notice going on in your neighborhood? In my neighborhood, people blow grass clippings all over the place. I don't think anybody uses fertilizer because we have crappy lawns in my neighborhood. we blow grass clippings everywhere.
I got a pretty good neighborhood. They're all, I mean, I'm sure there's some tweaks that could be made, but they're.
You can work in mine.
Were you talking about the behavior change campaign or the
Yeah.
to focus on like one
Yeah,
vehicle
mostly
for
the behavior change, because it's not like we have a vast, I mean, there are a few exceptions, you know, somebody lives in Minnetonka or Edina, but most of us are in South Minneapolis.
Yep.
And most of the water goes either into the creek or into the lake. And so they're going to be very similar issues for most of us. So we should try to figure out what's the most valuable ones. to focus on.
Behaviors?
Yeah, there aren't a
Yeah.
lot of vast lawns as a
I
now.
mean,
No, there are not. You're absolutely right. So, let's hand this around.
We can't talk about suburban lots because we don't have any. You know?
Would you have?
Well, an option, just in terms of behavior change, I know in my friend's South Minneapolis, like litter is endemic, and just the amount of litter,
Yeah,
and
there's
just helping
litter.
people realize
There's
that
downspouts, there's roof.
and that just that water picks up all of it and moves it quickly into the storm sewer, which moves it quickly to the lakes or to the streams, and just
So what you're getting now is a framework, it's a suggestion only
sweeping up the lakes and the
for how
grass.
you might want to approach an interview or working with homeowners. So those of you who were in the behavior change track who worked with Mandy, remember the nightmare scenario she presented? So what do you do for work?
Yeah.
On your interview? Right. So these are the kinds of things we think might be relevant to talk to a homeowner about. How do you like to get information? Do you live in the neighborhood? Do you work in the neighborhood? Do you commute? What do you do for recreation? Some of the things, these are some of the suggestions for what you can talk about. On the second page,
So these are the tools you're referencing in the proposal. It says which tools are you going to use to take the assessment?
or are you going to create your own? You might want to create a survey. Some people might survey. But on the second page, these runoff reducing behaviors, these are sort of universally accepted as behaviors that will improve water quality, things that individuals can do that will reduce their impact on water quality. Pet waste, lawn chemicals, watering the lawn, fertilizer and sweeping it up, grass clippings, leaves, cleaning the storm drains, sweeping sidewalks instead of hosing them down, composting, kitchen waste.
Or instead of blowing them
Yes,
in the gutter.
thank
Yeah.
you. Change car maintenance, sand, salt, de-icing chemicals.
Compost yard and kitchen waste. I do that, but what's the connection?
Because when you use compost, when you compost, you generally use your compost. You are improving the infiltration capacity of your soil.
Oh.
You use it as mulch, you use it to enrich your soil. The better the soil is, the better the water is. So fertile, healthy soil is foundational to clean water. So anything you do like that improves the health of your soil.
So we could create a survey, bring it to our neighbors and say, for our night out in August this
Yep.
year, we're gonna have a theme of water. And so we're gonna collect some data to see what people know about water. And would you complete this survey and send it back? Call tricks, because we all have everybody's email.
Yep.
So that would be an example.
Exactly. And
And
the
then
other
we
thing.
could then we could do a little chart and report to the neighborhood,
Yep,
the people who come that night,
yep.
what they said.
And what's really important is this last column is what keeps you from doing it? What are the barriers to that? We did a study in Como Lake neighborhood. And we asked people, do you sweep up your leaves and compost them off-site? Do you compost them on-site? But do you sweep up your leaves? And a lot of people said, I don't, because once I get them swept up, I don't have anything to do with them. And I can't, it's an older neighborhood, it's an older demographic. They can't lift a 20-pound, 10, 20-pound bags of leaves. They don't have a pickup truck, they can't get them to the waste haul site. So the Cap Region Watershed District said, we will spend part of our water quality improvement money to hire a garbage truck from the city to pick them up and take them to the compost site. So now, in Como neighborhood, you can put them on the boulevard, and a city truck will come around that the Cap Region hires, and they'll take them to the compost site. And so for a tiny little investment from the Watershed District, everybody's behavior changed because they found out what the barrier was. So these are all things that we could do to improve water quality, but we don't. I don't do all of these things. But I could. If I could think about the barrier, what keeps me from doing that? Well, it could be just that I'm bone lazy. It could be that. But if that's it, then offer me some help. Yeah, I might do it then. Or maybe I just don't have time. Then offer me some help. So that barrier will give you a lot of information about what do you do next. Is it an organized cleanup? Is it... You'll get a lot of information from understanding what keeps people from doing things. And all of these are tiny little steps we take that all matter.
2 and 3, I sort of had the impression we were hoping for people to use fewer lawn chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
But this is use lawn chemicals as if not using them at all is a more negative behavior than using some. Is that?
No, there's no value judgment on these. These are just questions, do you do this or not?
Mm-hmm.
But you did say all of these could help.
Yep, if you use fewer lawn chemicals. So if you find out that everybody in your neighborhood that you're surveying uses lawn chemicals, how could you influence that? What's the alternative?
As in fewer.
As in fewer,
Okay.
yes.
And with watering, it's. Is there anything like last summer when it was with the drought? Was there a problem with ultimate water quality to not water at all, or do you like to keep your stuff alive somewhat to keep the ground more porous?
That's a great question. There was a recent study from the University of Minnesota on turf grass. And people are going to keep their lawns. You're not going to get rid of lawns. How do we get the best performance out of our lawns? And so they came up with, if you fertilize this amount at these times of the year, your lawn will become more absorbent. So there's ways to say you don't have to give up your lawn, but only water on these days, at these times of days. Put a rain gauge out so you can monitor how much water. In times of drought, you have to make a decision about which things you'll let go dormant and which things you'll save. I had new trees last year. I watered my trees. My lawn was hay. It was just parched. It's beautiful now. It's got all kinds of rain. So I let my lawn go because I don't put a high value on the green lawn. But my apple tree and my new cherry tree, I watered them. So it's about helping people make good decisions about water.
I almost hate to bring it up, but in the drought of '88, the University of Minnesota assured everyone to let their lawns go, they'll come back. My mom lost her lawn following that advice and had to replace it. So their word might not be, for anyone who remembers that, their word might not be.
And there are limits to what a lawn
Yeah.
can tolerate.
I remember that, and it's true. You can let your lawn go dormant up to a point. Now, it's figuring out what that point is. You know, if the drought lasts 6 weeks, maybe that's okay.
8 weeks.
10 weeks,
I don't
maybe.
know if most people remember it was awful.
Yeah.
I never want to see anything like that again.
Yeah.
So it's about making good decisions about these things. And what you're trying to do is influence the quality of decisions that people make about these practices.
Well, in a lot of cases, it's those decisions are going to be better if they're based on more and or better information.
Correct.
So hopefully we are part of disseminating more and better information.
So as you come up against that, if you're interested in lawn care and how do we make the best decisions we can about lawn care for water quality, drop me a note. Say you need a study. I look at these studies all the time. I can send you the turf grass study. I can send you studies on the nutrient content in grass clippings.
Go to the University of Minnesota Extension
Yes.
website.
Or the Water Resources Center.
Yeah.
So as you come up with scenarios where you need more information, contact me. Other questions?
I might mention this.
Yep, go ahead and mention that.
I don't know if anyone noticed, but on the webpage I put a link to, what is it, the Sewer and Water Department of Minneapolis. And on that page, there's a link to the drain stenciling program. And the person who's in charge of it, Lane Christensen, who turned out to be rather nice to deal with. I traded some emails with him. And he sent me out, along with the stenciling program, they have these door hangers. And that you can go around your neighborhood. And I think they'd be great conversation starters, if nothing else, with the neighbors. But I brought enough for everyone if they'd like. Why not? Please feel free. And Lane Christensen got back to me and said, please have anyone in your class get in touch with me. I'd be happy to help, and let you know what you can do. So
There's a lot of help out there. There's a lot of support from us. All right, so what I would like to do now is we're going to take a 10-minute break. Everybody stand up, drain, fill, do what you have to do. Come back. We're going to talk about, a little bit more about these behavior change campaigns before we move to the rainscape. Okay? So 10 minutes. We did a lot of work with teachers in previous career. And Mrs. Johnson is sort of your typical elementary school teacher. Mrs. Johnson has an igloo unit that she's been working on for years. And in the igloos.
Ice cubes, igloo.
Igloo. Like the Eskimo. So she would have her students build an igloo in the classroom and get into it.
Oh, unit as in learning.
As in learning unit.
Oh.
She would have them build models of igloos. She would read stories about igloos. She would have them draw igloos. She would have them research different kinds of igloos. She would hold morning meetings in the igloos. She would drive this theme into the ground. She would do everything with these igloos. And at the end of it, they spent weeks on igloos, Mrs. Johnson's igloo unit. At the end of it, if you asked a student what they learned, what do you think they said? Igloos are cool. What? Igloos are cool. That was one thing.
Do you know what it looks like?
You know what it looks like? Exactly. Nobody could say what they learned. Nobody could say what they learned.
Probably said, nothing.
I don't know. So, what Mrs. Johnson did is she did she designed things the way we design things. She loved her igloo unit. But what I'm going to encourage you to do and think about in your behavior change campaign is called backwards design. It's a very, very effective theory of learning. And what you're asking people to do is learn something. So, the first thing you want to determine in backwards design is what do you want to have happen? What's the outcome you want? Do you want people to learn something? Do you want them to do something? Do you want you let them to do something differently? But you have to be able to write a simple declarative sentence of what you want to have happen at the end of whatever you're going to do. Make sense? All right. So the next step backwards is how will you know that it worked? So how will your neighbors, friends, colleagues demonstrate that they're achieving this outcome? And you have to be able to write some very simple quality indicators. Numbers, 90% of the people I talk to sweep their sidewalks, whatever it is. But you have to be able to write a simple declarative sentence about how your neighbors will demonstrate to you that they're achieving this outcome. Then, what experiences are you going to design for them so that they can demonstrate they're achieving the outcome? So are you going to have an open house? Are you going to knock on their door and offer to help them? Are you going to design a brochure? What are you going to do? Are you going to talk to the lawn care companies? What are you going to do? But you don't start designing the experiences of building an igloo and building models of an igloo and holding meetings in the igloo and doing all the igloo activities until you know the outcome and how students will demonstrate that they learned about igloos. Does that make sense? So when you're thinking about your behavior change campaign or your outreach campaign, that's step one, that's step two, that's step three. So don't start thinking about door hangers until you know what you're asking people to do as a result of that. That's the experience, but it may not be enough. And so if you know the outcome and you know how you want people to demonstrate, door hangers might be part of it. It might not. What are your questions?
So Mrs. Johnson's problem was it was too broad and too scattered and too...
Mrs. Johnson's problem was she did this part.
She didn't know what.
She had no idea what she wanted students to learn.
You have to be intentional while you're doing that.
Yep.
You have to tell people what you're doing.
Yes. Now, Mrs. Johnson's igloo unit was how she was going to meet a geography standard or a history standard. So she said, oh, history, we'll do igloos. I love igloos. But she had no idea what part of history she wanted her students to learn, and nor did they at the end of the unit. So if you're just talking about door hangers, if you're just talking about an open house, if you're just talking about the experience without first determining the outcome, you can't measure it, you can't know that it worked, you can't design appropriate experiences to get your neighbors where you need them to be. Because you don't know where you need them to be. You haven't said.
Well,
Question.
so I'm thinking about this thing we played around with a couple weeks ago about alley behaviors and downspouts going into the alley.
Mm-hmm.
So before you can decide what your outcome is, don't you also have to then go through the alley and say, of the 20 garages in the alley, 17 of them have downspouts going into the alley, maybe
Yep.
3 don't?
Yep.
Because if you're gonna demonstrate it, you don't wanna use 20 because three already
Yep.
doing what you want them to do or don't have garages or something.
So your outcome would be neighbors whose downspouts drain to the alley. Divert those downspouts to a permeable surface. That's your outcome.
And at that point, are you even specifying the number that you hope to change? Or are you just saying, we're gonna change some of these? We don't know how many, but by the time we're done, there are 3 now that are doing it the way we like. When we're done, there'll be 4 or more.
There'll be more, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of saying, of the 17 that drain to the alley, we're going to get 12 of them.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of that.
You don't even know.
You don't know who they are,
Yeah.
you don't know what they care about.
Right.
You know, 3 of them may be 87-year-old ladies. They're not,
Yeah.
so right there you blew your goal. So your outcome is more, it doesn't have to be that specific, but it has to be an outcome. And diverting downspouts from the alley, perfect.
So the outcome is changing where your downspouts go. Demonstrating that that occurred is just counting how many downspouts have been changed.
How many downspouts have been changed in a way that makes sense, in a way that's effective?
Okay.
Because they could move them from the alley to the driveway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the experience has to show them that that's not what you're looking for.
Exactly.
So you invite everybody over and when you move your downspout or your neighbor that you convinced to do this moves his downspout, you invite everybody over to say, oh, see, Fred did it, here did it, it was over here and now it's over there.
Okay, so one of these 83-year-old ladies says, I'd like to do that, but I can't do that.
The barrier
Is
is
there
I can't do it.
anything keeping us from going to Home Depot and buying her an elbow or two and sticking it in?
There's nothing keeping you from doing
I would think that 87-year-old ladies would be much more likely to change their behavior than 3 87-year-old men.
it. And that would be interesting data to get. Sorry, got a question.
I just want to make sure I understand these steps here. So I want to quickly go through all 3 of them because I asked myself questions just to actually help with the project at hand. For the first one, outcome, will the question be, what is the vision of our project?
It's not a vision.
No.
It is not a vision. It is an outcome. It's concrete.
Measurable.
Okay. So
World peace is a vision.
I think
Clean
that's
water everywhere is a vision.
okay. So I'll rechange the vision part for the second one. Demonstrate. I had question: how will we affect change? Would that be correct or accurate?
It's what you want to see people you're trying to influence do. It's the observable action that results from your experiences.
And so for the last one, experiences, what would the outreach teach about the importance of water quality or?
It's what you're going to do and what you're going to ask them to do. You're going to ask them to come to an open house. You're going to talk about all the money that's available for putting in stormwater management projects. You're going to talk about how much cleaner we can make this water. We're going to talk about making this an exemplary neighborhood. We're going to tell this story of this neighborhood that came together. Whatever it is that you're going to do. So the outcome is what do you want to is the goal of your outreach campaign. This is the action you want to see. And this is what will you do.
I'm thinking of the demonstrate as measurement or something that you can point to.
Yep.
That says, how do I know, for example, that my neighbors are now mowing their lawns longer? Now, that's a hard one to measure or demonstrate, but I would want to think of what it was that I could point to.
So on
say,
Saturday afternoon, when everybody in the world is mowing their lawn, you're going to walk around the neighborhood
with a stick.
911. Yeah, someone said weird water lady. Somebody said, no, I'm not stalking you. Yeah, so
She wears a funny T-shirt.
pull back from the stalking line. Pull back from stalking. Yeah. But you might want to just ask people, hey, did you raise your lawnmower up? Mowing longer?
There, okay.
Just so it could be that simple.
Yeah.
But what do you want to see? How are you going to measure? What is the action you want to see them do that tells you you're reaching your goals?
Okay.
And this is what will you do to get them to do this so you get here. Does that make sense, Jabari?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you need to convince them.
Let's say influence.
Is it safe to say Jedi mind trick?
What's that?
Is it safe to say Jedi mind trick?
Yes. If you can use the Jedi mind trick, use it.
Thank you.
I want you on my team.
All right, so now, what I'd like you to do is we're going to stand up, move around. I want you to get with your team, and I want you to start to write this down.
Before we get with our team, do you want to cover anything, any other questions on this sheet that came up? Specifically, you want to talk about budgets?
We'll
Is
get to the
anybody else
landscaping
here
in just a minute.
without their
So
team
we're
member?
just gonna focus on the behavior change campaign right now. So just take like 10, 15 minutes, sit down with your partner, talk about the goal would be the behavior, right? So let's be clear about that. The behavior that you want to influence, you want people to adopt, you want people to start doing or stop doing. But be very specific about what is the behavior that you want to talk about. Clear?
Well, I mean, can we talk about how we're going to do our survey and where and all that, and be kind of open depending on the feedback we get, what behavior we might want to? Okay.
Yep.
So this is just kind of like a sample practice.
Just sample it, practice it, write down some goals, write down some demonstrations, demonstrable behaviors. Just practice.
Okay, so we started talking about, we wanted to do kind of a seasonal or year-round plan. So we started talking about reducing the amount of grass clippings more in the spring, summer, and then carrying that over to educating about leaves in the fall.
And what do you want us to do about it?
Yeah, to kick them up out of the street. So reduce the number by cleaning them up, and then also increasing cleaning cover.
So basically, you could group those things into one category of lawn waste.
Yeah.
Grass clippings and leaves are both lawn waste.
And how will they demonstrate that for you?
We talked about when they would have, say, there's a program in the neighborhood that exists with there's bags provided, a cleanup provided. So we would observe how many people utilize that.
So you're going to count participants.
Yes. And then count after the education how that increases.
And the increase. Okay? And what are the experiences you're going to give people?
And it is, ironically, your example before, what we hope to do for our project is the rain garden piece, but then having an open house with the neighborhood and having people come and educating them about our behavior change through that.
And so it's really based in conversation.
Yes. And snacks and beverages. Snacks and beverages.
Snacks and beverages. Excellent. Yes.
Somewhere else probably.
All right. Somebody else.
One of the projects we talked about was increasing, or the outcome would be rain barrels retaining water, or rainfall.
So an increase in rain barrels.
Yes.
Okay.
The demonstrate part, just to follow the similar language, counts attendees for the event that we want to hold, and thereby the number of rain barrels that go in after the event.
And count the barrels. Okay?
So,
And then,
does that conflate attendance with the rain barrel installation behavior?
interesting question.
Well, with our experience, it would put the two of them together because the goal is to have the people who come take the rain barrel home with them.
Oh, you're
And
going
they-
to distribute rain barrels at your event.
Yep, and then we're gonna have different participants, and they get to decorate their own rain barrels that they get to take home.
And
So
then
what
the-
is your event that you're talking about?
The events, well, we have an inside scoop. There's a youth group that works with a car wash to take their 50-gallon barrels, and the youth group builds them and turns them into rain barrels, and then they distribute them and sell them for money to support the operations of their organization. And so we would work with that youth group to have a community rain barrel workshop where we talk about runoff and the importance of retaining water on sites, and then they paint their own barrels and decorate them, take them home and install them after we showed them how to do it on the property we're doing this workshop at, and then they know how to do it. And then everyone drives around, they see these beautiful works of art on everyone's corner, and more people are interested, and it's a
Excellent.
domino.
And
Good job.
if you count these two things, then you will get some information about how effective that was.
Exactly.
So 20 people came to your workshop, but only 8 of them took barrels home.
Mm-hmm.
So next time, what would you do differently? How would you increase that from that 20 people came, now 12 people took rain barrels? So by counting both of these things, it'll give you information on the effectiveness of that experience to get you there. Good.
I have a question. I mean, I love the idea. I'm just wondering, how do you know if people actually use the rain barrel? Because I had mine for 3 years before I actually used it. Yeah,
And it's
it sat in my yard in the right place, though.
Collected water. And that's a good question. We would hope that the education that we provide shows them how they can use it. But there's obviously just that question of are they going to. But even if they don't, worst case scenario, they stop at least 50 gallons from going in.
So eventually they do. Yeah, it's
Worst
kind of an
case
inertia
scenario.
problem.
Can you also include a follow-up visit?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that's kind of where it's going.
So 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, we promise we will come by your property and notice if you've hooked it up. If you haven't hooked it up, then what?
We'll help you.
I mean, we want to keep it communal, also to give children also an opportunity to be creative and for them to learn something new outside of what they're learning in their actual curriculum.
And to teach.
So can your youth group do the follow-up?
Oh, they sure could. They would love to do that.
I mean,
So-
as long as we make it entertaining for them, like, hey, we can yada yada, and you know.
They've already got the ownership.
So
they
think
would-
about how do you create these experiences that increase the likelihood that you'll get to your goal. So a workshop may not be enough. You may need that follow-up visit. You might do it, the youth group might do it, but you might need that reminder and that additional piece of help if installing it is a barrier.
We would setting up a questionnaire afterwards to ask how the workshop went. Would that be appropriate as a follow-up?
How would you send it? How would you get it back? There's all kinds of reasons not to do a follow-up questionnaire. Whereas if you show up and you got a wrench in your hand and you say, do you need help hooking up that rain barrel? You'd have said yes, wouldn't you? Yeah. So think about these experiences and do they get you to your outcome? One thing we know is that raising awareness and providing education does nothing to affect behavior. Nothing. Nothing. Raising awareness. I knew it was bad for me to smoke decades before I quit. Right? I know that exercise every day is really, really good for me. And I can go months without doing it. Right? Raising awareness and educating me is not how I make decisions.
But sweeping your sidewalk or something like that, once you're made aware, I think it's countereffective.
It doesn't. It does not. Raising awareness and providing education does not change behavior. If I know that exercising every day is going to get me back on my bike, I exercise every day. Because I can barely walk. It's connecting to something that you care about. And if it's simple and it provides me a benefit, that's what changes behavior.
It's the emotional component you're talking about.
Correct.
Between thought, emotion, and action.
Yep.
Yeah.
We make decisions
Incentive
with
and motivation.
We make decisions with our emotional brain. We do not make decisions with our rational brain. So if it's kids who are having fun, they're painting rain barrels, all good. I'm making a decision because I'm supporting my youth group, I'm supporting my neighborhood, I'm going to put beautiful art out there. That's an emotional decision to show up. Hooking it up, that's rational. So that's my barrier. I might need some help with that. So think about the experiences and how you're helping attendees get to that. Somebody else. Another outcome you want to share?
Under yard management, more plantings, less grass.
More like native plants? Or just plantings? More landscaping? More,
answer that.
more,
Longer, deep.
okay, so native plants, deep-rooted plants, and less lawn, right?
Correct.
And how will people show you that?
We'll count the persons who do any new plantings where there was grass.
Okay. Well, what kind of experiences will you create for people?
Conversation and engagement to find out who is at all interested, and then giving relevant information on doing the very first new planting.
So conversation, you're going to gauge their interest, and then
That information, whatever they need to get the first new plant where there has been grass.
okay. How does this make it easy to do that and get there? What information very seldom changes behavior.
Well, it's the conversation and engagement, because we're not going to give any information to people who don't grab the hook of what we've heard from you today and previously as, would you like to be spending less time mowing your grass?
Yep. Can you work with a local nursery to offer 50% off anybody who comes to them after having a conversation? Take this to your local nursery and get 50% off the kind of plants we're talking about. And that makes it special. I mean, you only get this card if you talk to me. And nobody else in the neighborhood is going to get one without talking to me. So this is a special offer for people we're working with in the neighborhood to increase infiltration through native plants. I went to a company called Glacial Ridge who had a booth at the St. Paul Farmers Market. I was working with an elementary school. They wanted to plant butterfly gardens, native plants. And I just approached the guy and called him up out of the blue, said, working with an elementary school, they want to put in native plantings to study butterflies. Can you give them a deal? And he's like, yeah, I'll give you 50% off. Great. So just ask. And then print up that little card and make them feel special. And you only get this, because that's part of engagement. It's way more than information. It's removing a barrier.
Suppose I wanted, like they are going to do, suppose my outcome is I want more rain barrel installation and usage.
Yep.
And my barrier is, well, geez, it costs a lot to buy the barrel and the whatever else. Is it possible that some of this funding could be leveraged for deals on rain barrels or?
Possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quite possibly. Plus, watershed districts want rain barrels in. They offer free rain barrels. They offer rain barrel workshops. They offer discounts on rain barrels. Once you start looking into how available rain barrels, what's that?
Does Minnehaha Creek Watershed District offer rain barrels?
I don't know the specifics of that program. You
Okay.
have to look into it.
Okay.
But I know that Mississippi Watershed Management Organization does, Cap Region does, Metro Blooms does occasionally.
Okay.
Watershed districts want them out there, so they're trying to remove barriers.
Okay.
So work with them.
Okay.
It may be.
In this framework, so outcome, demonstrate, experiences, we keep coming up with barriers.
Yep.
Where in this, it seems like we need to be like listing barriers.
Yep.
And do you have a recommendation about where in this process?
When you
Identify.
talk to people initially,
But I'm thinking about this framework because it's coming up as we're talking
It
about
is.
outcome, demonstrate, experiences. So do we start, when we go to outcomes, start talking about what's going to keep people from doing what we want them to do?
yep, you do.
So kind of, in there would be like 1A is barriers.
Yeah, as you're working backwards, and it sort of comes in here, in 2A. You want people to increase the number of barrels. You're going to count people at the workshop and then count the number of barrels that goes in. You're going to have to know what keeps people from installing rain barrels. Because that's how you're going to design your experiences. You're going to design your experiences to overcome the barriers. And you have to know what they are so that people say, yeah, you know, it took 3 years to hook up my rain barrel. You know what? We can send a crew over to help you. When would be a convenient time? So if you know what the barriers are as you're designing the experience, that's a really good point. If you know what the barriers are as you're designing the experiences, you can account for them. And you can have that answer for people when they say, yeah, I just don't have time. You know, I'd love to help you. I've done them before. They're not that hard. Take 2 hours. Saturday would work for you. So as you're talking to people and you're trying to understand what people already do, one of the things you need to ask them is, well, what keeps you from picking up the pet waste? Is it just too icky? Or is it inconvenient? Or you forgot the bag?
No place to put it when you do collect it?
Exactly. Find out what keeps people from doing things. And don't assume you know. Because in the studies that I've looked at, when people start talking about barriers, it's quite surprising what keeps people from doing things. It's really surprising, and it's small. It's little stumbles that, I just forgot. You know? I forgot my reusable grocery bag again. It's in my trunk, yeah. Right. Mine's on my radiator cover because I stacked them up after I unpacked my groceries and I just forgot to take them out to the car. So it's little things. But you're absolutely right. If you're aware of the barriers, you can plan the experiences to address them and account for them. What other questions do you have? Does this start to make sense? It's such important work to think about before you go out. Because if the outcome's not clear, you have no target.
Is there somewhere we can go for preliminary pricing before we say, I want to put in a cistern, oh, by the way, that's going to cost you $50,000? Well, I guess I don't want to do that anymore. Before we come up with our...
We're putting together a resource directory right now of businesses that do this kind of work so that you have people to call. So we're putting that together now. Minnehaha Creek has a directory of resources that you can look at their directory to find out who does this work so you can get some ideas of costs.
And how are we going to get some idea of what our budget limitations are? I mean, the scale of my project, I can dream up a tremendous scale project. I want to do that driveway thing where but that's like $10,000 or $12,000.
Sure.
I assume that that's not.
There's funding available.
There's funding available. Each practice that you put in the ground, Minnehaha Creek will provide up to 50% of the cost of the project, up to $2,500.
Okay.
So a $5,000 project is the limit.
Okay.
Don't plan for any more than that. And then we're supposed to find out soon if we've got some additional funding for projects.
Okay.
But really, as you're thinking about this, $5,000 is the limit of your budget. And that means you've got to figure out another $2,500.
Right, it either has to come out of my pocket or I gotta find.
Donations or other funding.
Okay,
So really, keep it small.
yeah,
These first ones, keep it small.
okay.
I'm sure they'll be in your resource directory, but where do you go for these native plants? Are there some popular places people go?
Oh yeah, like Glacial Ridge does nothing but native plants.
Who's that?
Glacial Ridge. It's a nursery company. And yes, we will have that in our resource directory. There's lots and lots of companies that do prairie restoration, that do native plantings exclusively. So we'll put that together.
What about that cost share for the properties, for the individuals that we're approaching specifically? I haven't gone back to the website. They said we're doing the outreach program and they say, yeah, I want to do it. And the cost share.
There is cost share for them as well.
Right, but has the date, because initially I saw it was May 31st.
Yep.
It'll be May 31st next year.
Also,
Unless it's our project.
Yeah, okay, so it's
So-
a continuous thing.
So with Stewart's projects, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Sure.
So we'll just find out.
For the public. it's
For
a
the
yearly
general
thing.
public, it's an annual deal.
Annual.
Yep.
Oh, well, there you go. So if they don't do it necessarily now, they can forecast for next year.
Yep, you can help them pull a plan together, you can talk about what it's going
And
to
would
take.
that count in your count? Or,
Oh, yeah.
Like, does it have to be final installation, say you did the rebuilds, like, you know, like they, well, I guess it would have to be the final installation.
The projects that we're counting in our project count are the projects you're doing directly.
Oh, yes, yes.
If
yes.
you're influencing somebody to do another project,
Right.
we're going to track that,
Okay.
but we're going to count 12 projects. We need 12 projects.
Yes, but I mean, in our behavior outreach portion of it.
Oh, yeah, we want to know that, we want to know that the people you talked to then took the action, the step
Went
to.
ahead.
Yep.
So one that's forecasting doesn't count, that's maybe, that's a question mark, like we can't.
What we'll track is you got a positive response,
Sure.
and they indicated they wanted to take the next step to put in a
And that's the
BND.
data for you.
Yep.
But as far as our outcome, or experience, how we demonstrate, that's right.
Yep.
It wasn't, like, we can't count.
Not in, no,
Not in our, the scope of our outreach.
But we want to know, that's one of the things you'll measure, is how many people said, next year, I'm putting that
I'm
in.
putting it in.
That's one of the things
Because
we want to count.
it's an outreach.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
It's a huge
But I mean,
thing.
the final data would be, for the mini project, there, outreach would be the hardcore structures that
Yep.
were put in.
That you're putting
But we
in.
still had a change in behavior.
Oh, yeah, and I want to know that.
And because, I mean, finances is personal, right? Like, what, maybe.
Yep.
So you could, that might be a approach to, if we can't finance all of it within our budget for our project, teach them how to apply for grants.
That's it,
bet.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
The experience portion.
So the
Because I
next
think
year,
it's
you may
the
go
bucket.
back and help, just sit with them over coffee and help them put together the application.
So like something in the rain barrels, in your resource bank, like would it be like how much, like amount of water bill a rain barrel affects? Like I have no idea, I don't know much about.
I don't know if that has really been calculated.
Okay, because
I
I
mean,
mean, that was.
You can just figure that this many gallons I did.
Oh, yeah, and then you can, and then how much it is per gallon.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Are we correct to assume that you can do an average size residential rain garden for $5,000 or less?
Yes,
Okay. Again,
that's why they put it
timing
that.
just runs off.
That's been their history.
It doesn't really.
But it depends.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering.
Let me just say that, it depends. You could put in a small rain garden for a couple $100, but it totally depends on the site, the soil, the size, the infiltration capacity you want to achieve, how much drainage is going in there, if it needs a retaining wall. I mean, there's all
And
kinds
how
of
much
conditions.
labor you can provide for.
Yes.
So the next time it rains.
My case.
How much digging you can do and how much you
Yeah.
need to hire the men with
Holes,
magic
like into your yard.
And there was a thing in the application that the homeowner can charge up to $12 an hour for their own labor.
Yes.
So that could go in the
Yes.
budget, I would imagine, for us as well. So
Yes.
we're doing the digging that we did.
Yep, you put that in.
I have a two-part question.
Yeah.
So some of these outcomes that we just talked about, and this is
Yeah,
use
it's
as
not-
example, rain barrels and reducing grass clippings don't necessarily require a professional like engineer or landscape architect to get somebody to do that. However,
Behaviors generally don't.
right. However, planting native plants or designing a rain garden, we need to get a professional involved in that, I would assume. At least I certainly hope so. And part of that is so that we don't create something where we're discouraging people from using native plants because they create something in 2 years that they can't stand to look at.
Correct. So that's a really good point, Roxanne. Let's talk about this. You're designing and seeing through the installation of a rain garden. But you are not rain garden designers. And you never will be.
Right.
So when you have your open house and your neighbor says, "Oh man, I'm going to put a rain garden in," the next thing you do is you recommend a good designer. You stop it. You stop that. You're not a designer. And don't expect to be. What you're trying to do is advocate for structures and practices that have a positive impact on water. So when your neighbor says, "Oh, I'm going to put in a rain garden too," then you say, "I've got a resource directory of folks who do this kind of work. We've worked with them before. We trust them. Choose one of these people."
What do we do about our own rain garden?
So are we going that's the second part of my question. Are we going to refer to the resource directory to get a designer to come in? And two, are they going to be then part of the budget? Because I'm assuming we pay them.
Right.
Yes. So one option is Metro Blooms offers a consultation for $60. It's a 1-hour consultation. They'll look at your plans. Is it 75? Thank you. So $75 of your budget is going to be a consultation with a designer from Metro Blooms who will look at your rain garden and give you a critique.
Another 75 for design.
Right.
75 for a consultation, then if you want a drawing, like where she got, then it's another 75.
Great.
How detailed is the design?
Not very.
I can show you what.
Yeah, and what if I have an atypical site where that design needs to take into account some
So
difficult features?
now I'm going to speak on behalf of my profession.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really important as stewards as we go out for people that we talk to have a realistic sense of what design costs.
Yeah.
$75 is nothing. There is no way on this earth that I could design anything that's worth its salt for $75. So as we go forth from this program, I just please encourage you to understand that just like in any profession, there's a cost associated for that service. The people that come to you have an incredible education and experience background, and they are going to ask to be paid for their services. And that needs to be communicated to a homeowner. So as we're doing this, yes, we may have resources for $75 or $150, whatever it is, but that isn't real world.
Right. This is Metro Bloom.
This is Metro Bloom, and I'm not trying to diss Metro Blooms or any. I mean, they do great work and great things, but that is just the beginning. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of a larger process. So I just need to say that.
Right.
So as you design your rain gardens, first of all, between now and June 18th, you have to do a site assessment. You got to go and look at where the rain garden is going. You have to get a map. You have to do some of the background work of understanding the site. The assistance that we're going to give you in this is to bring those preliminary ideas to the next session on June 18th, and the designers from Metro Blooms will be there to help you understand what you're looking at and help you talk about your designs.
Should we be doing soil samples before that?
If you can do a perk test,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Where do we go for that?
The perk test is
Yeah.
just dig
Dig
a
a hole and hold water into it.
We know how to do that.
Oh, okay, so mine disappears and never fills up, so that's done.
Sue?
Okay, so we've done that.
What other questions? Really good point. Design has to be part of the budget.
Yeah, and particularly since we're trying to promote native plants, I just met with somebody last night and I was asking her about certain plants that are native plants and she said, oh, no, they're just messy. Any plant can be messy.
Right.
If it's not designed appropriately and then maintained appropriately.
And appropriate for the site.
And appropriate for the site. I mean, there are so many layers there that need to have a conversation accompany all of this. And so, you know, it's about appropriateness on many different levels.
So again, understand, when you're talking about rain gardens, when you're talking about installing projects, you get the interest, you get them engaged, yeah, I'm pretty interested in that. Then you send them to a designer. Then you send them to a workshop. You're not going to do the design or the installation of those projects. Okay?
They can't.
No, you can't. I mean, you spent most of your life getting this education. It's important that we send our neighbors to people who are competent professionals. Otherwise, you'll fill up your basement, you know? All the water will go into your basement instead of...
So, but I do have a question. It'd be good to know, like, I think that kind of answers a question for me about whether I would promote a lot of rain gardens. I mean, it'd be great, but it could very well be cost prohibitive for many, many, many people.
It can be.
So
Or
it'd be
not.
good to know numbers.
Well, and here's the thing, the trade-off, and there's layers. So if you see somebody, you meet with somebody and they're just overly concerned about the water getting into their basement, they could call a basement professional and spend thousands of dollars putting in a sump pump and all the drain tile and all of that. They could start there, redirecting the downspout.
Sure, but then I'm back to redirecting your downspout is not rain garden.
No, but then redirecting it to what? And then it might lead to a rain garden. And I can guarantee you having a designer design a rain garden is a lot less than the guy that's going to be excavating to do the basement remediation.
Oh, sure. I'm more
So-
talking about like promoting things that my neighborhood's not fixing everything. Because they're not big earners.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's just having an understanding that there's different layers leading.
Sure.
You know, that they can address, so they can start at one end of the spectrum or start here.
Yeah.
So-
Installation doesn't have to be a rain garden, it could be a rain barrel.
It
Yeah.
might be a rain barrel,
Or
it
rain
might be
sheet
a
or
dry
something, yeah.
riverbed, it might be a trench drain, you know, it could be a number of things. And the other thing I'll say about design, and I think this is a perspective that's out there, and at least from my experience, is a lot of people look at design as creating beauty. But for design to be good, it has to function well.
Yep, I've got a functional problem, and I need an engineer to say, if you want to get that water not to puddle up on your sidewalk right next to your foundation, and you can't have that rain barrel freezing in the winter, here are the possible solutions.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I share that with you to help in the conversation with people, that a good designer will be able to talk to you not only about how beautiful the space will be, but that all of this will function well together.
It will solve the problem that you're having.
Right. Right.
Yep.
Right.
And it won't create any
New
problems.
That's right.
I think that's a good point to bring out, because in some cases you wouldn't even be advocating for rain gardens because
Exactly.
they're more involved than people think. And you go to Metro Bloom's workshop and they say everyone should build a rain garden. That's what I got out of that meeting. Don't you think, Erica?
I think that they're trying to give more options now than just the rain gardens. They're reaching out to more of these smaller practices.
It's kind of like do it yourself. They encourage people just to build their
They
own.
do encourage people.
And we
to
can do it in 6
themselves
hours, and 3 of us
it's
did it in
not
6
profit.
hours.
Yeah,
And so is that like, in some cases, is that worse than not doing one at all? Or is it do some good?
It depends. There are some homeowner design homeowner-installed rain gardens that do work. They're better if you have more background knowledge going into
I wish we had
design.
some sense of that when we're talking to these people, like what we should be saying, like promoting them or not, you know.
You know,
It's not an either or.
they work where they're appropriate and when they're well designed. They work. And they are, going forward, they are part of how cities plan to manage stormwater. So we want more rain gardens, but we want them where they belong, where they're appropriate, and we want them designed to function well. But we want them.
And I think the biggest thing that we're promoting is water retention, responsible use of water. And there are so many opportunities. That's what you can say to people. There are so many opportunities that can get you there. And here are some of them. And here are some resources of people or organizations that can help get you there.
Yep.
That's what we're doing.
Exactly.
And I mean, we're all here for a reason. Like, we all have a drive for water retention and water quality itself. So that should be the motivation itself. So you shouldn't have any doubts on whether or not that your project is going to work or not.
Yes, and what you're promoting is responsible use of the water that falls on your property.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time with the conversation, just because I'm a builder, carpenter, and I work with people and I work with them and then let them go on some building projects. And I've designed some building projects, small ones. I know kind of my limits. So I think there are times when you can maybe not spend $500 on design, and maybe that 1 or 2 hour consultation can work. For example, we hired an architect friend of ours to come over. He looked at our house. He spent an hour doing some quick sketches. He gave those to me, and I did a $25,000 remodel, and it looks fantastic. But that's because I have some skill in that area. So I just wanted to say there's a little bit of...
But if your architect friend had given those drawings to me,
right,
they would still be in my drawer.
And yet I know some homeowners that are amazing at fixing their houses. So I think, all I'm saying, it's not cut and dry.
It's always going to depend
It
on
absolutely is not.
Yeah.
And so I will give you a perfect example of that. I met with a fellow who, he basically called me because he had purchased 2 arborvitae shrubs, evergreens, and he wanted me to place them. That was the consultation. And we looked around his property, and I could see that he had some other bigger water issues. And so, and he also is on 2 very busy streets. So we talked about, is privacy important to you? Because why is it that he's buying arborvitae? Oftentimes we buy these evergreens to screen ourselves from something that we don't want to look at or be a part of, right? And that was going to affect the placement of those 2 plants that he purchased. We talked about how he could move water from his back door. Now, some of the suggestions I was making to him, he doesn't feel comfortable implementing them. And I could tell him because it was like deer in headlights. Like he was just like, oh my gosh, where are we headed now? Well, by the time I left, we had a sense of where those arborvitae were going to go. So I satisfied why he invited me there. But he had some other things that he was going to want to address, and he wants a professional to help him get there, or an organization like this to help him get there, some other people. Because sometimes it takes a village to address certain projects. So I agree with you. Consultations can answer lots of questions, but not necessarily the ones that are something that we're uncomfortable with.
Right.
And again, we're not asking you to do the projects. We're not asking you to design them. We're asking you to be an advocate and an ambassador. We're asking you
behavior change.
be out there and for the installation of projects, to encourage your neighbors where a rain garden is appropriate to pursue that aspect.
Okay, but we're all expected to do one rain garden or one kind of thing that we are responsible for getting in the ground.
Yes.
The project.
Yep.
But as we move forward.
As you move forward after this first project, You're not expected to do the project. We just want you to advocate for them.
Advocate.
To show people what they can do, to show people and talk to people about why it's important.
Find the information when they don't have it.
Yep, exactly right.
So for our actual project and for our actual budget, we're able to budget in that extra design cost, and we're able to budget in the cost of the materials, and we're able to budget in the labor and everything else, and all of that is incorporated, so we're not asking the property owner to cough up X number of dollars. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Understanding that cost share is up to $2,500, up to 50% of the project, up to $2,500.
So
So
as
I
long as you
made,
can stay under that and have some other sort of funding source, whether it's community,
Yep.
donation, popping up from the person who's doing it,
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Okay.
Part of what we want you to learn through experience is once a project has been designed, where do you go for money? How do you write the application? We want you to go through that process so that when you talk to your neighbor, you can say, oh, don't write it like that. I had nothing but trouble. Do it like this. We want you to go through the experience so that you know where the money is, how to write the application, so that you can talk to people about it.
So if we're doing a project for ourselves, in some ways, it may not be the same considerations that you would for like a neighbor or someone else,
Mhm.
right?
It will depend on the project.
Yeah. So you may not learn as much in some ways if you're doing your own project.
I don't know. I think every project is going to require the same kinds of steps. So that you can say to your neighbor, well, listen, when I did my project, it went like this.
and I used these resources, and I liked these, and I didn't like that.
Yep.
And I got this outcome that I liked, but I also didn't achieve this.
Right.
What I would
I
do
talked to
different
this
next
designer,
time.
but he was too grumpy, so I went
Yeah.
to this one.
Yeah.
And I don't mean you. I worked with a carpenter who was the grumpiest carpenter ever. And I'm like, you don't get to come back? I don't want grumpy in my house. But
The $5,000 project limit, is that just for the rain garden?
The garage,
Or is that for the rain garden behavior?
that's for the installation project.
Okay.
It's for the installation
Is there any
project.
funding for the behavior change?
Not at this point. That's what we're trying to get. So, yeah, big sale.
Car wash.
Stand out on the pervious papers in the car wash.
Using biodegradable.
Oh, you didn't
All
right.
You said, 50%, so are you saying that some projects might only get 20%?
No, you'll just ask for 50%.
So 50 is just, it's just flat 50? Yeah, okay.
50% up to $2,500.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay. I want to be really conscious of time because they told us we have to be out of here.
Wheels up.
Wheels up, that's right. So I've got two other things to share with you. Well, actually three, but one I'm going to give you the takeaway. So when you go to a site, one of the things that Rusty talked about is what you might want to notice when you go to the site. So I put this together based on what Rusty said, the books that I've read, the other programs like this that we've looked at, and we're going to go through this one very quickly. This is just a suggestion or a framework to help you remember what are you looking for when you go to a site. When you look at your own property, what are the kinds of things that you want to notice? Because your property is in a neighborhood, it's in a context. So we want you to look beyond your property to what else is there. So some of you are talking about alleyways where you've got 17 properties draining to an alley. We want you to go out in your neighborhood and notice those things. And there may be other things that you want to notice as well. This is just a suggestion. Part of this came from Metro Blooms, part of this came from other stuff.
The size of a normal city lot.
I don't know what the size of a normal city lot is. I think it depends on
Must be about
the city. 50 by...
The width is like 40, I think.
Yeah, because
40
mine is
by
like
80, is it?
40 by 80. 45, 100.
It's like 100 or 120.
20 inches, I think.
Okay.
But that's what ours.
Because I've got a lot of hand, mine's 60, so.
Mine's 50 by 100. So it's going to depend on the neighborhood, it's going to depend on the city, it's going to depend on the age of the city. So this is taken from what Metro Blooms suggests, and Becky shared this with me, what Metro Blooms suggests you look at. Then the other thing that we want you to notice is what can you observe about what homeowners do as practices? And that's that 19 through 30. Do you observe these things, or can you ask the homeowner, including yourself, about these practices?
This is going to be available online as well?
All
so
of
I
these
can-
will be available online. So we'll put this up on the site tomorrow.
I just have to get access to it.
And where will they be?
There's a
Resource to the multiple opportunities for finding something, right?
Look in the For Stewards,
Yeah,
that menu.
yes,
There'll be a resources.
under resources.
So we'll put,
This is more for the percentages, I would assume, are relative to the
That's
lot.
the thing.
relative to the lot itself, yes. So this is just something to think about as you're looking at sites.
You don't have someone take ownership.
Then the final thing I have to give you, and this is something that you'll take away tonight and look at over the next couple weeks. This is the cost share application from Minnehaha Creek, and you'll all fill one of these out.
Wait, back up.
Yep.
I'm just looking at this site evaluation. On the back, 14 and 15, or actually 13. I think it's 13B, rain barrel, if yes, go to 16. A rain garden, if yes,
I
go to
think that's
15.
mixed
Is
up.
that a
The numbers
reversal?
are off.
I think
Adjust
it
all
must
of
be
those
The rain
down
garden
one.
has you going to rain barrels, and the rain barrel has you going to rain gardens?
I'll adjust all of the numbers on the
Okay.
right down one, because the question,
Yeah.
the last one, so
A
as
should be
permeable
14.
pavers should be going to 18, so adjust
Yes.
all of those down one.
Yeah, so if it's suitable for a rain garden, then go to the
Okay.
rain garden section. So the numbers got
All right, thank you.
moved around. But thank you for pointing that out.
Sorry, go on.
No? Anything else? All right, this is the last thing, and then we'll take off. Everybody's gonna fill one of these out. Every team is. So you'll fill out one application per practice. So if you've got in mind to put in a rain garden and yeah, maybe it's 2 rain barrels and a rain garden. The guidelines on the application, I am not familiar with Minnehaha Creek's guidelines. Each,
This is online.
yeah, it's online on Minnehaha Creek. But yes, take a copy. Just to read. Yeah, so everybody should get a copy of this.
Okay, anybody else?
Well, perhaps so.
Each team will fill this out for the practice you're going to install. But take a copy and become familiar with it.
Okay, it will make sense, ooh, I got 2 of these. It will make sense to do this after I have done site assessment and project proposals, so that I know precisely what I'm going to be.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which is why I left it to the end.
I think it's important to know that a whole bunch of these pages toward the end, like one
4 of them, it says draft cost sharing funding agreement. You don't actually fill that out until they say, okay, we're gonna approve your thing.
Correct.
Because that's the agreement between you and the watershed district that you're gonna do what you said you were gonna do.
So the way this
So the
works is
application's
you're
actually
gonna
very
do a site assessment, you're gonna figure out what is the appropriate practice to put on? What is the appropriate?
What's the problem?
What's the problem? What's the product that's gonna fix it? So you're gonna do the site assessment. Then you're gonna draw up your proposal. The capstone proposal. So you're gonna write down, this is the project we're gonna do.
By the 18th.
By the 18th. Then you're going to bring that and whatever behavior change project you want to do, you're going to bring that on the 18th. And we're going to provide a lot of feedback for you to make sure you're going in the right direction. You've answered the questions that need to be answered. You've asked the questions that need to be asked. Just to give you some feedback and some further thinking on it. Don't fill out that application until after the 18th when you get some feedback.
Thank you.
Don't do that. Because your plan might change a little bit.
Yeah.
So don't do something, only have to do it again. Don't waste your effort. After the 18th, when you said, well, here's my site, here's the problem I identified, here's the practice I think will solve it, and here's the plan, and then here's the behavior I think I've seen in my neighborhood, and here's the outcome I want, and here's how here's how I'm going to measure it, and here's what I think I'm going to do. Bring all that on the 18th.
Whoa.
It doesn't have to be in terrific detail yet.
Okay.
This
I'm inclined to spend more time on the in-the-ground project assessment and proposal and a rough.
That's why you're working with a partner, and that's what I mean. Somebody's
not
going to
here
take
tonight, and I don't know how much I'm going to have to do this solo. I don't know.
do the best you can.
Okay.
And on the 18th, we'll get as much detail as possible. Okay. So on the 18th, expect to bring sort of the raw materials. Bring the raw materials of your thinking, and we'll use the 18th to shape it into a project. Okay? What other questions do you have?
I'm excited!
Yeah, get him on your team.
Who's you?
Excellent suggestion. Also, if you have an opportunity, if it's your site, bring pictures. Bring as much information as you can to the next one. If you've got a map, bring a map. If you've got an aerial photograph, bring that. If you can go out on the site and take some pictures, do that.
Yeah, we can take pictures.
And I can get aerial photos off of Google Earth and somewhere I have
So what other questions do you have before we stop? Ron! And don't panic. We've got lots of time to do this. Don't panic. Bring the raw materials if you're thinking next week.
12 days.
It has to be to be cool to take pictures to get that. You have more knowledge.
You can't speak.
Yeah, but it's getting